Welcome to Move Like This, brought to you by the Accounting Move Project and sponsored by Moss Adams, the Center for Accounting Transformation, and CPA Trendlines. On this podcast, we share ideas and hear from guests about how they find, retain, develop, and advance women and other underrepresented groups in their accounting firms. Now, on to our guest. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Move Like This. I am excited today to be talking to a colleague and friend and somebody I've known for quite a while, Carrie Steffen. She is the CEO of the Iowa Society of CPAs, and I appreciate you being here today, Carrie.
I am so excited to get to chat with you, Bonnie. It's been too long, first of all, since we've seen each other like in real life. But I'm just super excited to be here. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks. Well, give me just a little bit of a short introduction about what it is that you're doing at the society. I know it is a relatively new position, though you've been in it probably longer than it seems like in my head, because time is relative for sure lately. So yeah, tell me a little bit about what you're doing there.
Yeah. So, well, some days, full disclosure, it feels like I've been there forever, and some days it feels like I just got there. So it depends on the day. But as you mentioned, yes, I am the new CEO of the Iowa Society of CPAs. I've been in that role since May, so it's just over 6 months now. So it's still relatively new and still learning a lot of the things, but it's an interesting role because I came out of, as you know, the consulting world, and had worked with with consulting and with CPA firms for, many years, 25 years actually, and then was in a firm before that in a role in their marketing organization. So it's kind of adjacent to some of what I was doing, but it's definitely, as I'm finding, it's different. So it's a lot of it's kind of three categories. So the first is membership, which, it's a membership organization at its core. And so we're focused on how do we grow that and provide engagement opportunities. The second piece is educational. So making sure that we are providing content and educational opportunities for our members that is relevant, that's timely, that they want to participate in, and then the administration behind all of that. And then the third leg of that stool is advocacy, which is something that I have done informally, have been an advocate for the profession, verbally and, through presentations and whatnot in my career. But this is a different role for me in that it's formal advocacy, legislative advocacy, basically. So, working on behalf of the profession to advance, legislative agenda.
Wow, that's a big job.
Yeah.
I know you can do it, and well, obviously have been for 6 months. So, and you just mentioned that you spent years as a consultant to the profession, and advising firms on growth and marketing, and now on the front lines as CEO of the Iowa Society of CPAs. So what is it that feels different about the profession from this vantage point? And I guess what surprised you the most when you stepped into that role?
So I'll start with the surprising piece. And I don't know if it was totally a surprise, but I think it's something that has been amplified for me in this role, which is how challenging really good communication is. And I know that you realize this as well, but the importance of it, figuring out how to meet people where they are when there are so many different perspectives, people who are in different places in their lives, in their geographically dispersed, firm side, like all of these different things that, make up this big tapestry of the profession. And meeting those folks where they are from a communication standpoint is one of the things that we continue to try to manage as best we can. We, trip over it every now and then, like everyone does, but it is super important. And so being focused on that, I think, is again amplified. It's something I knew, but in this role, I'm getting a different taste of it because of the diversity of our membership. So that's interesting. I think what feels different about the profession from this perspective is I do feel like I've flipped kind of to the other side, if that makes sense. Like if you're, even when you're consulting with the profession, you're not exactly like in the profession. You're sort of on the outskirts of it, and you have to kind of be invited in to it. And I think what's different about this role is now I feel like I'm more in the ecosystem, I'm more a part of the ecosystem. And neither one of those is like good or bad. I think it's just different. It's a different feel. I think I'm starting to see more the profession more holistically on this side, being exposed to some things that I didn't get exposed to on the consulting side. And again, a lot of that's related to the advocacy piece, but that feels different to me. And that's probably the area, we have talked previously about being uncomfortable as a sign of growth, and that's probably the piece that has made me the most uncomfortable. That is challenging me to grow the most. That's the way I should think about it.
There you go. That's okay. You can have your moments of being uncomfortable. I think
Yeah,
I have a whole lot of them, obviously, and I think we all do, but
sure.
coming out the other side, right?
Yes.
Well, shifting a little bit to move here.
Yeah.
So in our 2025 report, we talk a lot about the cost of losing talent and the urgency around firms creating a sense of belonging for the people that work there. And so, from where you sit, what forces, cultural, demographic, economic, whatever they might be, do you see reshaping the profession most right now?
Um, One of the things that I think is having an effect on the profession right now is, and I think will probably shape this newer generation of CPAs that are entering into the profession, is the economic stability or instability that we are seeing right now. We have a generation of CPAs that are kind of my age, that are like this Generation X, that came into the job market during a recession. It was kind of a hard time. We sort of, buckled down and took what job we could and stayed for a while and, did all of those things. And then we moved into a different generation where, the millennials had a much wider, the job market was good and they could handpick where they wanted to go. And I think that for employers, they were more worried about people leaving, and so they made more concessions. Like there was just it was just a different feel. And now we're back into this place of economic uncertainty in a lot of ways and managing that. And so I think that we are, college graduates are having harder time finding jobs now as they're coming out of school than they did 10 years ago. And I think that will, I don't know exactly how it's going to affect that generation, but there will be an impact and an effect on that generation. I think the other thing that is shaping the workforce is this desire or this need for community, that we all have this sense of like wanting to belong, and again, I know you're focused a lot on that belonging, that inclusion, and going somewhere where you feel like you fit for who you are. And I think that we are all, I think that's shaping us as professionals. It's shaping us as human beings. It's shaping us like in our day to day, right? This idea that we want to find our village, find our communities, and lean into those. And so that to me also, I think is a huge cultural force that is shaping the way that firms are looking at talent, that people are looking at where they want to spend their time, on the daily. And for us as a state society, it's one of the places where we're trying to figure out how we can provide more opportunities for that among the people that we serve as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's generational too, is a lot of the people I've talked to, like Gen Z
Yeah,
and even younger millennials, I they do care about money. They do want to be paid.
for
They,
sure they do.
all of
Right.
those things, but they also look for kind of meaning in their work and want to work with people that they enjoy working with and feel like they're kind of feeding each other in a positive way. And
Yeah. And it's a different mindset. And to your point about it being generational, it's definitely a mindset that didn't exist in the marketplace 25 years ago. I mean, your employer was not responsible for your happiness or your, like your joy or whatever. You were there to do your work. And, at the end of the day, you went home and did whatever you did at home. And there was a lot more separation. And so I think that is definitely something that we're seeing shift and, helping to figure out how do you teach a younger professional who's in their first role how to navigate that, how to balance it, how to,
Yeah.
work yourself into that.
Yeah, you're right. Those lines are a lot blurry or a lot blurrier.
Yes.
And but they have a really good point. We spend more time at work than we do pretty much anywhere else
Yeah.
in our lives. So why not, with the people running firms are in a very different position than people working in firms because like they are in the catbird seat, right? They're like if they don't like their employer right now, and while this is definitely shifting, the chances are they can quit today and go find something else relatively quickly, depending on
Yes.
where they are and the type of work they do. So, firms are in a position where they do have to pay attention to this for sure. And, find a way that we'd like to say, find that balance where all the work is getting done and yet people do have a sense of feeling like they want to, like they belong with their employer.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's the key to the sustainability of the firm, whatever that looks like. And I think the firms that don't pay attention to that, they're the ones that are going to have a hard time sustaining themselves into the future. So I think it's an important, so which, the owners, the people who are sitting, in those seats in the high places, like you were talking about, they do care about that. And so that is one of the reasons why this hits, how this should hit home for them too.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of already skirting the talent pipeline topic, but what I have found is with not probably not even the majority of firms, but often the conversation does stop at, well, fewer students are majoring in accounting. And there's been a slight shift there in the last year. We're still down on students graduating with accounting degrees, but that'll shift as well. But after years of working with firms, what do you think is actually driving the decline, and how should the profession kind of rethink its messaging to this next generation of people that are coming up and deciding what they want to do when they grow up?
Yeah, I think there are two forces at work on the decline piece. The first one you mentioned is the messaging, and I think that's one of the things that as professionals, I think sometimes CPAs have done themselves a disservice in talking about
Oh
how
yeah.
challenging the work is. It's not that we're trying to gaslight anybody into thinking that it's all unicorns and rainbows all the time, but we have to be realistic about what the role is. But I think that emphasizing the mundaneness or emphasizing, the deadline piece of it, again, those are realities, but there are firms that are also navigating those deadlines differently. They're making changes inside of their firms to, level out their work. And so again, there are things that are happening that are changing that, but we also as a profession, I think need to talk about it differently. And I know that when the National Pipeline Advisory Group released their report, that was one of the, the eight sort of pillars that they were pointing to in the way that we affect the pipeline overall and telling a better story. Each one of us has the opportunity to do that and talk about the interesting work that we're doing and the value that we're creating. To your point about people wanting to feel like they're making a difference and they're doing work that is meaningful. Got to talk about what that is. And so we as a profession need to challenge ourselves on what that messaging is. And I think there's some work underway to start to do that in a different way. I think the AICPA is looking at how they can message, what it means to be a CPA differently. I think the state societies are talking about that. I know for me personally, in our state society, we're talking about that a lot. Like as a member, part of your responsibility is, to like not turn people off by telling them how terrible your job is. So that's one piece of it. I know, right? So that's one piece of it. I think so. That's one force that I think is happening. The other force that I think is at play is the rise of all of these new jobs around finance and technology. And, it's kind of the hot, like sexy place to be, right? Accounting has been around forever and it's kind of like your old stodgy uncle that sits at the table. And, all of a sudden now we've got like this young person that's here and it's flashy and new and different. And I think that we are trying to figure out exactly how those two things will coexist. We need to like make the uncle a little bit more attractive to the conversation, but we also need to recognize that, the new flashy thing isn't always going to be new and flashy. And I think that the stability piece is something that we ought to be leaning into as a profession, the stability of the accounting profession from an economic standpoint. I would put accounting up against any, tech job, any finance job in terms of demand, stability, um, earning income potential. Even if you don't end up being a firm owner, there is a nice, nice living to be made as an accountant, as a CPA. So, again, without the drama of the ups and downs of the tech industry. And so I feel like we need to lean into that also because that, that's another opposing force that it looks really, really shiny. But again, my son graduated from college last May and had friends that are in, software development and programming. And you talk about jobs that are at risk for AI. I mean, we talk about that impact in accounting, but I tell you, it's a huge, huge impact in the world of software development. And so finding jobs in that segment has been difficult for those kids. So again, those are a couple of things.
Yeah, I actually feel bad for kids that are in that graduating from college now and trying to
Yeah,
look at careers because there's so many factors at play that, we didn't
agree.
deal with 30
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, right.
Um, well, we kind of touched on belonging, and of course that was a huge focus in the move report this year. And it is, I mean, we found that it is one of the biggest things that will make firms resilient, regardless of what's going on with the economy and everything else. People will stay. But when you think about firms in Iowa or just nationwide, uh, where do you see or how do you see belonging being done well? And, where is the biggest gap?
I think in terms of where I feel like where it's happening well or where I've seen it happening well is when firms that have leaders that believe in it. So, I mean, it does have to start there. Is not belonging is something and that resilience and whatever is not something that comes up, from a grassroots, like that comes up from the bottom necessarily. And as much as I would love it if it could be more like that, I think we know that it has to start with leadership. And so the firms that I see that are doing a lot of the right things, that are leaning into the things that make people want to stay there. They're leaning into the innovation that young people want. They're leaning into, the flexibility and the remote work that not just, early career people want, but mid-career people with families and, they're dealing whether they're parenting kids or whether they're dealing with parents, and those folks that are kind of in the middle of all of that, they need flexibility and want flexibility. So, the firms where leadership has embraced that idea are the ones that are having less trouble. I'm not saying that nobody's having trouble finding people, but they're having less trouble with hiring. They're definitely not having turnover challenges like some firms are having. They just they're doing the right things the right way, but it starts with their leadership. So I think the gap, if you wanted to, I guess the other opposite end of that is the leaders in firms that, feel like status quo is just where it's at and that they don't have to evolve, they don't have to change, that we don't have to do anything differently because what worked for us is going to work for others. And it just, we know that that's not the case. So to me, that's where the gap is. It's in that leadership piece.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually commented with others on this podcast about the whole like leadership's like, well, this is how I did it. And, they should have
Yeah.
to jump through the same hoops and suffer the same as I did.
Yeah.
And, I turned out fine. And I'm like, I would argue that maybe you didn't. That, I mean, if you think about it, like if you want others to suffer when
Yeah.
you knew what the suffering is, like I don't feel like that, we want to
Yeah.
try and make things better for people, right?
Right.
And I'm not
Which,
saying,
by the way, is not limited to the accounting profession,
oh,
right? I mean
no,
that we
no.
know that is happening. It's, my brother is a physician, and when he was doing his residency, there were, doctors that had been practicing since the dawn of time that said, well, 60 hours on is, good enough for me, is good enough for you. Like it's not necessarily related only to this profession, but certainly if we look at it within the ecosystem of what's happening in the accounting space, it's, it's here just like it is everywhere else, and we have to
Yeah.
recognize that.
Oh yeah, no, it is everywhere. To every profession has their, the thing that makes it challenging,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
if we can kind of even that out a little bit, then let's
yeah,
see if we can,
yeah.
Well, so in your previous life, I
Mhm.
know that you've probably been in hundreds of partner retreats or leadership conversations, certainly. So if you could give firms one clear directive or advice for staying relevant and competitive over the next 5 years or so, what would it be?
Um, I would say listen to the voice of your next generation, right? They need to be in the rooms where decisions are being made. They need to be part of your strategy conversation. They need to have a greater influence on those decisions than, the people who have been in those chairs for a long time. If you are a leader, I think that we're no longer in an environment where we can just do the same thing for, 10, 15 years indefinitely or whatever and feel like we're going to be successful as a firm, as a person, whatever. And so, the idea of being managing change, learning to manage change and being intentional about managing change, bringing in people who have the energy for that. I think some of our leaders are just tired, quite honestly. I mean, and rightly so. We've dealt with as a profession a lot of change. There's technology changes, there are legislative changes that they have to navigate. There are mergers that they have to, private equity and business models are changing, and there's a lot of change. And I think some leaders are just flat out tired of having to manage it. And so when they get tired, they just lose the appetite for it. And so bring in those folks that have not only the energy for the change, but also are going to be there to manage through it and pay attention to those things. And that would be my biggest piece of advice for leaders that want to stay relevant is you need to listen to what your next gen they're closer to it than you are, and you don't want to admit that maybe necessarily, but they're closer to what it needs to be than you are. They're digitally native, right? I mean, we're
Yeah.
hiring folks in that have never really been in an analog environment, and we're never going back to an analog environment. So why would we keep leading on the basis of analog sorts of practices?
Yeah. Well, and my last real question or professional question for you, your answer might be the same because it was kind of like now that you're in this role, what initiatives or priorities are you most excited about? Especially those that support, growth and talent and future readiness for the profession.
Yeah, I'm really excited about helping leaders like shape the narrative around what CPAs do, right? And understanding all of the there are so many different options.
Yeah.
If you have your CPA, you can do lots of different kinds of things. So, the idea that it's this, same old kind of job after you get out of school, that everybody's going to go into the same sort of system isn't that's not modern anymore. That's not the way that it really works. And so helping people, young people especially, I'm still really passionate about that next generation. And I know you and I have talked about this, that one of my favorite things in my previous life before I started this role was to interact with those next gen leaders and hear what they're talking about and what they're thinking about and their ideas and helping to figure out how they can make a bigger difference for the people that they work with and the people they work for and all of that. And I think that what excites me about this role is the opportunity to like keep doing that work in a different way, through the channels of the state societies. It's kind of interesting. I think that one of the other things that's different about this role, and this just occurred to me, I didn't really think about it when you asked the question, but when I was running a firm and I was working with clients, I was very selective, especially towards the end. You only have so much bandwidth, and so you have to be really selective about who you work with, right? And we coach our firms on being very choosy and, having that ideal target client and becoming more narrowly focused in that. And in the state society role, I don't have it's not a luxury. I don't want to say luxury, but I can't do that because I have to serve all the members, right? We want to keep all the members engaged. And so um, I think that one of the things that's different and the thing that I think is interesting and challenging from a like sort of a marketing perspective is figuring out how to meet those people, meet all of those different people where they are. You know, how do we serve all of them with something that feels relevant to them, that feels engaging to them? It's not a one size fits all sort of thing. And so that to me, I think that's one of the things that I get excited about just because my background is in marketing and communications and, you know, and growth and all of those things. And I feel like I have a different, it's like a different palette, you know, that I can work with now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Like when you were talking about the kind of uh talking about the job itself and the profession and all the different things that you can do within it. Like I do think we needed just a good old-fashioned rebrand is what
Yeah.
needs to happen.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's too many people, I think, look at it and go, well, that's just tax, and I don't want to do that. Like, why
Yeah.
would I, and there are those that are really excited about it, but I think so many times people just see the profession as, being misery in the spring, and then,
Yeah.
just doing taxes all the time. That isn't sexy.
No.
But
And
there's
quite
so many,
honestly, there are a lot of people that are actually in the profession that don't like doing taxes either. So, I mean, it's not, but there are some that love it. And again, to your point, there is something for everyone. You know, it is one of those roles. I think it needs just to be rebranded, like you said, and I do like the idea of that.
all right, we have
Yeah.
marching orders now. So
Get to
Uh,
work.
yeah, we'll do our best. Well, finally, I just have fun questions that I want to end with.
Okay.
And the first one is when you were young, 5 years old, just, a very wee Carrie, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Okay, so this is going to date me and is a little embarrassing for me to reveal to your audience. But the very first thing that I can ever remember wanting to be when I grew up was a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. It was like the height of glamour and of, you know, all of the things that little me thought was cool. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. I think you know that. And so our family was huge Denver Broncos fans. And I, as a kid, did not like the cheerleader outfits of the Denver Bronco cheerleaders because they wore these like chaps, and I didn't find that to be glamorous. But the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders wore those tall go-go boots,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought those go-go boots were really cool.
Yeah. I
And
remember watching them too, and
it,
they had some good branding back when
they
we were
had some
kids,
good
right?
branding. They still do, right? I think there's a whole like, isn't there a whole Netflix series on those Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders? I don't know.
Probably.
Anyway, I just that to me, and again, it's a little embarrassing because they're, you know, as I've gotten older and I've, you know, leaned into what it actually means to be a woman and, you know, all of the things, there are things about that have become problematic for me, of course. But I also look at that and go, you know, that was who I was at 5 years old.
And it still looks fun. I
It
mean,
still looks super fun. It still looks super fun.
yeah,
So
I like
I
that.
think it's harder than most people would admit. Like,
Oh, it's
they're
a
gonna go,
lot harder.
I'm sure.
I actually knew somebody that was an Atlanta Hawks cheerleader, which is not
Really?
nearly as sexy as the Dallas Cowboys, but the routines and just the athletic ability they have to have is pretty off the charts, and they get paid next to nothing.
Yeah.
So,
And I think like the coordination of, you know, how they come together and the precision of that to me actually is really, really impressive. Like their
yeah,
jumps are all the exact same height. Their angles are all exactly the same. And that, I mean, you know, from just the whole idea of wrangling people generally, you know, how hard it is
yeah,
to get people to do the same thing at the same time and then to have that level of precision. That is pretty remarkable.
yeah. I see no shame in that. Secondly, if you could travel anywhere, and I always throw in the caveat of money is no object. You don't have to worry about time off and what else, other responsibilities you have in your life. You can just take off and go somewhere. Where are you going to go and why?
Yeah, that is such a hard question because I feel like that's a really long list for me. I could do a lot of things.
Right.
I think if I had to if I had to really like sort of examine the purpose for why I would go, I would go to spend a lot of time in Scotland because I have family roots there that we have sort of researched over the years, and I have like a genealogy chart and sort of know the family tartans and the castles that are in our lineage, but I would love to go and just really immerse myself in that for a while. Um, that's probably it. There are a lot of other places I would love to see in the world, but in terms of like something that would be kind of meaningful for me, that's a place where I would like to go and spend some time.
That is on our short list for a trip next year. Is
Is
Scott?
it?
Yeah.
All
Uh,
right.
maybe. I don't know. I say short list. It's actually not all that short.
It's not that short, yeah.
We got to narrow it down a little bit, but yeah, I've not been to that part of the world and would really like to. And then finally, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Invisibility. I would love to be able to just not be seen by people at times, just to be there, but not be seen, not be looped in. I think the anonymity of that occasionally would be
Yeah,
really useful. Um, I think invisibility would probably be my superpower.
I think you could probably get a lot of benefit from that. There's
I
probably some things that you would discover that you didn't want to, but
Yeah, it's
uh,
probably true.
but no, that's great. Well, thank you so much. As always, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and we'll get to see you in person, I think, in February. So I look forward
Yes.
to that as well. And wish you all the best in your new-ish role at the Iowa Society.
Thanks, Bonnie. It's just always such a joy to talk to you, and I'm glad you look well. I'm glad you're well. I hope you enjoy the holidays. And yeah, we'll see you in February.
All right, you too.
All right.
Thank you for listening to Move Like This, brought to you by the Accounting Move Project and sponsored by Moss Adams, the Center for Accounting Transformation, and CPA Trendlines. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website at accountingmoveproject.com. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and colleagues too. I'm your host, Bonnie Buell Russick, and until next time, keep moving forward.